everybody, and welcome to another Small Batch Game Publishers live chat on Facebook and on YouTube tonight. My name is Emily with Small Furry Games and with the Small Batch Game Publishers group on Facebook. If you haven't checked out our group, you can check it out here. We're also streaming live on the Small Furry Games Facebook page and the Small Furry Games YouTube channel tonight. I see some of you are already here. Hello, Catherine, we see your comments. You can comment live during the stream and we will see them and pop them up on the screen and answer your questions. Let's take a look at today. So today we are talking with Bez Shahriari, who is in the UK, and Bez is a game The answer includes Yogi, the best party game of physical constraints, Cataclysm, a chaotic card play, and a whole lot of cat puns, and the L deck, a lovingly created game system, and many, many other things. Bez takes an interesting approach to publishing games in small batches, specifically in 100-copy batches, which is pretty cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I know there's a lot of small publishers out there who are thinking about publishing things in small batches. So my hope is that we can talk to Bez about how a Make 100 campaign works, what are the pros and the cons, what are the things to think about, and maybe help you decide if that's something that you might want to do with your games. So without further ado, let's welcome Bez. Hey Bez, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hello, thank you for having me, and it's a delight to chat to everyone.
Absolutely. And so Bez streams like every day, right? So you're a
yeah, at 10 a.m. UK time.
And 10 a.m. Yeah.
UK time. That's
UK
important.
time.
I mean,
so that would be
for Eastern Coast people, it's like 5 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ever can't sleep at 5 a.m. and you want to talk to Bez,
or maybe you're just living in a country that isn't the USA. Do you know what I mean?
That's true.
I mean, there are people in other countries, although you sometimes forget it. When you talk about the game crafter saying, oh, it's cheap shipping. No, it's not cheap shipping if you live in a totally different country. If you live on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, so Bez also brings the UK perspective too. I think you're the first person outside the US or Canada that we've talked to, and there's a lot of great people across the pond. So thank you, and thank you for staying up late my time so we could talk today. So I think a lot of people watching know a little bit about Bez already. Catherine says
hi, Catherine.
Hi. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, what to say? My memories of games are all sorts of things. My first ever memory is of a ZX Spectrum loading screen. For those who don't know it, you put in a tape, like an old tape cassette, and it would make a noise like and then it carries on for about 10 minutes. And then if you're lucky, you actually get a game. And these games were rubbish by the standards of what you could play on a mobile phone these days. But seeing my siblings play this, and then they were actually making things move on the TV. At the time, I was too young to really know what was what, but I knew that this should be a one-way system. Like, you shouldn't be able to interact with the TV, right? And so I fell in love with Prince of Persia. I studied what I thought was going to be video game design at university, but then they took out the design part because I was fascinated by rules design, like all that actual what we called game design. But then they made it more about the programming, which really depressed me. I went back to college, did a bit of graphic design. I did make a bunch of old Flash games back when that was a thing, and I fell in love with Go, so the ancient Chinese game, and through that I discovered Board Game Geek. I was like, wow, there's like loads of new games here. Went to a board game club. I had made some non-digital games before because I'd been told that making non-digital games, specifically games for a 52 card deck, is a really good thing to do if you want to make games, because having those restrictions, it pushes you down a certain road and you think, okay, what can I do with these numbers? And we could have just a 52 cards deck and we would still be making new games for thousands of years if that was all we had. Because if you think like deck building, that's something that you could use with traditional playing cards, but no one did because no one ever thought of it. And we're coming up with new mechanisms all the time. And I fell in love with game design. It was really moving to London that allowed me to playtest it, which is, of course, the way that you make a rubbish game into a less rubbish game. And so my first thing was called Hex Chick Game, and that was abandoned. And then eventually I made a game where it was kind of like Flux, but then once you get to the end, then it has something that tells you, okay, the person with the most points wins, but then there's another card that just says I win, but then that card has a different back, so it can be stolen by different people. But then there was one card in that game that said, stand up, if you ever sit down, give this card to someone else. If you have this card at the end of the game, it's worth 12 points, which wasn't enough to mean you definitely won, but the intention was would be a good chunk of your points. And someone's saying, hey, you've got this game about passing cards around, and it would feels like you've got this one physical aspect to it. You shouldn't be mixing the physicality with this card play. If you want to make a physical game, go for it. Make a physical game. And I felt like I'd been given permission. You shouldn't need permission. But if you want to make a weird game that's all about conversation, or a game that's just about, there isn't any winner, or a game that's literally about burning things. I mean, I'm not a pyromaniac, but just the concept of true destructible games where maybe you're burning a shape around a paper or whatever, and just do whatever you want. And I think that it was really inspiring to be able to then bring into this web of people like Matthew Dunstan and Brett Gilbert, who are amazing designers, and they've made loads of Euro games. And then I'm basically getting them to hop around the table and do sit-ups while their hands are all twisted. It used to be, and that obviously turned into Yogi. I was very lucky / fortunate, and that's the sequel, Yogi Guru, that Gigamic then wanted another version of it. And then after that, I worked on the L deck, Cataclysm, and I didn't do much else. Well, because there was a pandemic and stuff, but also I struggle with the final getting it done, with the final typesetting, laying it all out, getting it ready for print. And the truth is, like, acknowledging my privileges, I did start employing people. So at first I employed someone for about 1 day a week to help me finish Kitty Cataclysm and the L deck, to do things like scanning in and getting things prepared. And now, after the success of Wee Whimsical Creatures, a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after someone makes noises, I'm employing Christian, Eden Allen, Hacker Hearn 2 days a week. And without them, I wouldn't be able to do the ridiculous stuff that I do. I mean, literally all.
So tell us about this stuff.
I've done all of these this year. Mm-hmm. Tell us about all this stuff. Well, the next thing was a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your turnips. Maybe I can bring up a wee picture if you share my screen.
See. Go for
so
it.
This is a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises. I started off thinking, how many can I definitely sell out? Let me print 50. I will definitely sell out of that. And this was UK Games Expo 2021. I do have an established track record, enough that people, again, this is not me coming in as a first-time creator. This is me coming in with previous games. People know me from Yogi, from that was previously called In a Bind, but now it's known as Yogi. And some people know me from Kitty Cataclysm, and some people know me from the L deck. And people are like, oh, this is cool. Let me try it. And then 50 copies, it basically went within a day. And luckily, I had other stuff to sell for the remaining 2 days, so that was okay. But I was expecting it to sell out maybe at the end of Sunday or something. So I thought, wow, okay, that's amazing. Now let's do a Kickstarter. And this is actually some of the creatures in the second edition where, they're all just redrawn. And then I ended up having, that was my best Kickstarter by a big margin.
How did your Kickstarter do? Give us some stats if you know.
Oh, I can't remember. I would actually have to type it up. A game, probably can find it very quickly.
See, we'll race. We're already playing a game. Bam, found it. So £5,500 pledged of your £150 goal, with 814 backers.
Yes. So,
nice. So a little more
in terms of backer count, in terms of monetary count, in terms of how quickly and easily I was able to get it out there, that was definitely my most successful Kickstarter. And again, that made me think, okay, I can reinvest this money and get Chris to carry on working for me 2 days a week now, and let's do more of these sorts of games.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that you think people love about your games? What made people support your game on Kickstarter in such volumes?
This one, well, see, it's not me, because then my next one, a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different, and originally it was called Watching Out for Turnips, but then I've slightly shortened the title, so it's a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and counting your turnips.
I
see it.
So it's one word less. One smaller.
Yeah, yes. Much shorter.
Constraints. Very good. So this is so as the viewers are watching, if you're not familiar with Bez's games in the past, you'll see there are these whimsical, fun, hand-drawn illustrations, which you make the illustrations and you actually drawing and hand lettering these cards, correct?
Yes.
And I love the titles of your games too. A game about, and then you have to take a breath to say the rest of the sentence. I think that, and this is one of the reasons I'm always recognizing Bez's stuff when it comes on social media. And is this something that you intentionally, like, you know that these are the types of games that you want to create, and how do you consciously think about how can I make this a Stuff by Bez game, or is this just what comes out and you're just being authentic and this is what happens?
Are you asking me if the title comes first, or are you asking me if the concepts are you like?
I'm asking
I just try to make cool games. For this one, okay. The way that this came about was there's loads of games that are about matching things, and so it was like, okay, what's if we've got a game where you're trying to avoid matches? How would you do that? Well, maybe you've got creatures with different body parts. So you can see here, you can see basically all the creatures. Some of them have 3 eyes or no eyes or 1 eye or 2 eyes. And they've got 3 different torsos, so like the tentacles, wings and arms, and then 3 different bottoms. So the 2 feet, the chicken feet, and the little fishtail. Mm-hmm. And if any of them are the same, sorry, I clicked wrongly. If any of them, and that's the original hand drawing, if any of them are the same as the previous card that you've got, then it's a match. The whole game came about from me thinking, how can I make a game without matches? And I wasn't sure how the game would work. It was just, there's no matches. Let's have some stuff in the middle of the table. And if once there's no matches, let you grab them. That seemed to work. I played it with Chris and McCall. They enjoyed it. And then that was 2020, and then there was a pandemic, and then we couldn't play games together. And then a year and a half later, it was like, okay, now we can start playing games together. Hooray. And let's try this. And okay, that doesn't quite work. Okay, let's just try 4 different overall ways of playing this game. And then, hey, someone suggested my previous game, Grabble, which is one of the games for the L deck. That's working. And as I've made more and more games, I do start, I mean, I can understand why Rainer Knizia says, yeah, I'm focusing on my own stuff, because at this point I worked out that I've got about 20 like different things that I'm actively selling in a way, which is quite a bit, it feels like. But and so again, because of the L deck, like there were like tens or hundreds of games that like I've actually made that I feel like this is pretty good, but then I'm going to chuck stuff away. And so of course I'm going to be inspired by previous things. And so Grabble, where everyone's trying to make matches but then grabbing their own pile, and that was the key thing. And then 4, a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different, that was fine. But then someone said, hey, what if there's a card that does something even weirder? What if there's like a turnip? And then it's like, okay, what would a turnip do? A turnip's totally different to the creatures. You can go creature, turnip, clearly. But then why would you not just do that all the way? Maybe there's a limit to how many turnips you can grab. And so that's, but it's not as unique. I think that I could talk about why I think this game, if you, like looking at the stats, it had 288 backers, pledged 2,527. So that's like a really good number, don't get me wrong. But I was hoping it would be even better. I was kind of hoping it would be as good as like this, 814. Like, and I was maybe a bit spoiled for whatever reason. Why didn't it do so well? I mean, I feel like maybe noises, it's more interesting. This one, a game about quickly grabbing creatures, that's sort of different. And for the record, like there's beetroot versions, and then there's radish versions, which are much harder and they're deliberately confusing. But it wasn't as, whoa, this is something I've never seen before. It didn't grab people as much. And also I wonder if having the earlier release at UK Games Expo and then letting people get it, play it, and be, hey, I want to play more of it. And even though I didn't plan for it to be out of print for a bit of time, that really helped. And also, Big Tuck, Board Game Trading and Chat UK, I got to play a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify the monster noises with, I think, 5 of the moderators of that group, and they all basically said, yeah, this is a really good game.
I think I watched you playing it live with somebody, with a group of I think 3 or 4 people on Facebook, and that's how I learned about it. Actually,
oh wow,
I think the live stream, and then I ended up backing the campaign and printing my own, which I still haven't finished cutting out, but I color them every once in a while when I get around to them, and things like that. So I think, so the things that I see that your games have in common are this look of you're doing the art yourself. They are games that have fun and complexity. You can explain them very quickly to people, and people are laughing and having fun while they're playing them. And I think that joy and that simplicity, but also, and I don't say simplicity in a way that like these are really simple games to create. There's a lot in designing them, but the fact why I bought Wee Whimsical Creatures is because I knew that
I'm trying to identify the noises.
Trying to identify them while somebody makes noises is that I play games with people who speak a lot of different languages, where I speak some Spanish, they speak French and some Spanish, and maybe we're trying to connect. But it was a game that I knew that I could, if I could get through the teach, in broken whatever language, that we could have tons of fun even if we didn't speak the same language, and that really resonated with me as something that would be cool to bring to the table. So I'm looking forward to playing that with some friends. So your games are very Bez. You do other things besides games too, right? The all singing, the all dancing, Bez. So what else falls under the umbrella of Stuff by Bez?
I mean, Stuff by Bez is just game stuff. I mean, if I wanted to do other stuff, I guess I could. But as a person, my hobbies include dancing, although I don't get to do that as much as I'd like. I love conversing with people, and I enjoy some adult activities that I'm not going to get into. And but games are right now, I would say, a massive chunk of my waking hours. And beyond that, like today I spent a bit of time with family, which I'm away for a couple of days, and I try to make time for friends to chat. And I'm not as, sometimes I feel like I don't make as much time for other stuff as I'd like. But honestly, games are my passion, and it's what I think about the majority of my waking hours. That's not an exaggeration.
I think a lot of us can relate to that for sure. So 100 copies. So when did this idea of creating 100 copies of a game start? Did it start with the Wee Whimsical Creatures and trying to identify them when somebody makes noise? Or did it start with a different game? And is that a model that you find yourself repeating, and what about that works for you?
Well, I guess this really ties in with Brian's question. Like, look, 100 is kind of an arbitrary number. The reason I chose 100 is because that's what I feel I can sell. I printed 50 copies of the first ever edition of a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after just makes noises. And it sold out super quickly. And so I'm like, yeah, I should be able to print that to sell out of 100. 50 copies was what made financial sense. And so if you actually look, share the screen, and what goes into making 100 copies is I do art and I draw the things, and then I'm like, okay, how? And during the playtesting process, so this is like some photos of different, I know a lot of the creatures do look very similar because that's the nature of the game. And then with the turnips, they could have all been the same turnip, but that's not me. I want to actually draw 16 unique turnips for the deck, of course. Of course you would. I mean, it's just a little bit nicer. And then you've got them all laid out, and eventually, yep, there's, and by the time I think it's ready, I have already worked out what it's going to look like. I don't have to think, where is this bit going to go? Where's that bit going to go? I've already, within the prototype, I've already been like drawing the shapes of the characters and thinking about them and having ideas of, okay, this is what it's got. Each prototype that I make is hand-drawn. I know that some people, yeah.
So you redo. So let's say you've got the art. Let's say you have 52 cards in your deck. You design the 52 cards. You play test those cards. Then do you redraw all of them, or you redraw some of them, or how does that work?
Well, it depends. Like whatever I need, whatever's the easiest thing to do. It's like for one of these games, a game about quickly grabbing creatures that's totally different. Saying your, like, at the time it was just a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different. And so if it wasn't working, yes, I would redraw the creatures, because you have to. That's what the game's all about. The creatures have to be redrawn to be able to playtest it. But then I've got another game that I don't have this is not the final title, but it's a game about speedily selecting 7 cards that hopefully synergize. And it's a bit more complicated than my previous ones, but you're basically, there's a really quick drafting mechanism, and then eventually you end up with 7 cards and hopefully they synergize. If I want to tweak a number, I'll just kind of cross it out and add it on black pen or red pen or whatever. I'm not going to do more work than necessary. But at a certain point, it's be like, okay, I've done a whole bunch of stuff. This is now looking kind of unusable. And you know what? I've got some more ideas of how I want to do it. Now I'll maybe go into the spreadsheets. I'll type up some stuff. And then from the spreadsheets, I'll then write that out on the cards. And I find sometimes working on the spreadsheets is more efficient. And sometimes actually just drawing on the cards gets the ideas flowing. And so it's almost like I do a bit of that, then a bit of this. And I actually find it faster to draw, like, not brilliant art, but I'm actually going to see if I have any pictures of really early art on my Instagram. Like, just to get something where it's like, this is enough to let me know what it might look like. And I don't. Oh, here we go. Here's a picture of what one of my prototypes looks like. This is actually the ones that I was just talking about. And eventually it's like, oh, now I've got ideas for totally different themes and totally different things to synergize with each other. And here, let's redraw it. And so, yeah, when I think it was Brian Anthony said, what goes into making 100 games? Tonight,
the same difference, yeah.
Basically redrawing and then scanning the stuff. Then the scanned stuff goes into PDF. I need to write out the rules. That goes into PDF, and then it gets sent to printer. Printer prints it and sends it to me. As simple as that. And the key thing I want to say again is that at this point, I am employing someone 2 days a week. And so all I have to do is do the final art. So for actually, if we jump over to a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. So here, there are 4 different things I should really know. There's a cat, a bike, a bed, and and there's 3 different colors. So I drew the pictures, and then I did the coloring in by hand on a separate sheet of paper. Then Chris composited them digitally, and the star. I totally forgot the star. And then at this point, I spent like 3 hours doing that final art and writing for it, and Chris spent like as much as that, if not more, kind of doing the scanning and putting it all together. It's a fast process, and I feel like I've gotten it down to be like, if I wanted to make a game, like I've got other stuff to do, but if I wanted to make a game like within 3 weeks, I could probably make a game, like spend 1 week. That's all the time that we would have for the getting it out there, getting all the art assets done, Chris to do bits of work, and then 2 weeks for turnaround for printing.
Nice. So so we've got the prototyping phase and the playtesting. There's like the game design, right? And then so you're saying that
I'm just talking about
production is like 3 weeks for you.
I'm talking about like the pre-production. Like gotcha. And
so
I could get that done in 3 weeks.
So Brian's asking, does the printer assemble and package games, or do you and Chris? So do you kind of send off PDFs and the game appear, or is there more in that process for you?
So they come. I asked for them in wee bags like this, and I specifically asked for wee bags because I want them to be as cheap as possible. We do add extra stuff if I can. So with a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some makes noises, we actually, in every copy, we have, hey, I am Bez. Bez is brilliant, but also, you're brilliant. And then there's a wee card that says, you're brilliant, keep it up at the end. Okay. And we do put that in for the extra personal touch to remind people that they're brilliant, but they do all come in with just these little things. And they do all come already with little bags. So
they're already collated. So you get, if you order 100 copies, you get 100 little bags.
Absolutely. And this is done through a company called Dice Sports, who is, I would recommend them to anyone within the UK. But for international people, like most of the people watching this aren't going to be in the UK, just do whatever makes sense for you. Because for me, it meant that I can get this, and even if at the point where I was printing 50 copies, I was still making like £2, even when I was selling them at £5 each. And that's enough that, okay, it's not great profit, but it's something. Do you know what I mean? And it's enough to test the market. It's enough to express myself. It's enough to see what's going on.
Very cool. Yep, stuffbybez.com. So what are they? So you're looking at manufacturing these sets of cards. So they cost you about $3 for a set in the quantity of 100.
I can't remember what the GB Great British pounds to US dollars conversion rate.
Sorry. Yeah, right.
But I'm just talking in pounds. It cost me marginally less than £3, so 3 Great British pounds.
Okay,
and
then you sell for
I sold them for £5. But what I've started doing is the second edition is if they have exactly the same mechanisms and I haven't changed anything, then I will sell that for $7.50 to encourage people to get in early. And thank people for backing the Kickstarter or whatever. Nice. And that then, because part of the reason I also increased the price, it's twofold. Firstly, there were shops who bought from me, and then they started selling it at more expensive prices, saying, yeah, we know that you're selling it cheaper through your website, but if someone's in our shop, then they are going to buy this for £8. So that's we're going to sell it, and
Mm-hmm.
great. Like, I'm happy that people are going to buy it for that. And then I actually got Golden Geek nominated, which was amazing. So one of my games, I was astounded at like this tiny game that I just like done on a initially started with a weird print run, and I'd done like as a one-person thing against all these things from massive studios, nominated for a Golden Geek Award. And then obviously off the back of that, over the coming, I would say 3 weeks, there was an uptick in sales. It's like, wait a minute, when I'm selling some of these things to US backers, I'm not really always happy that I'm getting these sales. Sometimes I'm feeling a bit like annoyed, and that's a weird feeling because
Why is that? Because
because
of shipping them there, or because you feel like you
people were spending 20 quid and I was only getting like 2 quid of that, and that felt a bit unfair. And it was
because of the shipping.
yeah. And it felt like, if I charged 2 quid more, that would make a big difference to me. I'd be earning double, and then they would only have to spend 2 quid more. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so
we've got some questions here about sort of how you sell your cards. So you mentioned the Golden Geek kind of give you an uptick in sales. We've talked a little bit about Kickstarter. Let's say you have printed 100 games. Do you expect to sell those all in one place, or if you were to divide it up conveniently, like if you have 100% of your 100 batch, how many of those go out sort of in which directions? Could you estimate just off the top of your head?
Look, I'm not a great business person, and I know this is like where people are coming to this hoping for business advice. Like, look, you can listen to me and hopefully be inspired and maybe try some of the things that I do, and maybe they'll work for you. And brilliant. And I hope that if I can say anything, it's like the key is that doing small print runs, it lets you experiment, and that's brilliant. So keep doing that. And that's the key thing. For me, I don't worry about forecasts and how much I'm going to earn next year and how much I'm going to earn the year after that. I don't feel like there's a lot of value in me predicting that. I feel like the most valuable thing I can do is just try to do stuff and do the best I can and take the opportunities that I have, and hopefully some of them will pan out and hopefully I'll make money. And so, yeah, when my first game, I had a Kickstarter where it almost paid for my print run of 1,000 copies of In a Bind. And like, look, this is kind of a question that we're about to get to. But I could have been like, okay, this is how much I'm going to sell this year, this is how much I'm going to sell next year. But when I realized, oh wow, I could actually make a lot more money by licensing it to another publisher, of course I seized that opportunity. And with these games, when another company actually asked me, hey, would you like to do this? Or when I think to myself, hey, wait a minute, now I've got this collection of, like, I'm able to have a meeting with a big mass market publisher, which is amazing, and show them 6 totally different things and say, hopefully one of these will fit you. And they might say, oh, actually, yeah, a whole bunch of them suits us, brilliant. And the reason that I can do that is because they have kind of been stress tested. I see my self-publication, to be honest, at this point, not so much, yeah, absolutely, more art than business, but I see it also as a business in that it leads to me being able to then work out which of these games is good. I mean, so we mentioned, I'm just going to say the title because we never said the title of my latest games just from this year. If we could rush through those, if you could share the screen again. So we've got a game about stuffing balloons as a team without talking, but it's a card game. There are no actual balloons. That was the new one for UK Games Expo. A game about cute comical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises. That was also new for UK Games Expo, but it's just kind of a reskin. We talked about, and this is a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures, which tells you exactly what you've got to do. And this is my favorite one, a game about counting cats, shapes and colors that keeps getting trickier. I thought this was like brilliant. I thought this was mass market ready, but no, actually, it's too tricky. Not just because it gets trickier, honestly, because on the cards, sometimes you've got to count one type of thing, sometimes you've got to count two types of things. And I know it seems obvious that, okay, two might be a step too far, but you can playtest and playtest and playtest for weeks and hundreds of times, but then you go to a convention when you're stepping away from designers, you're stepping towards people who don't normally play games. I share these games at conventions. I share these games at markets, like some of these conventions in Norwich, Diceni, there's not that many people who actually play games. And so, yes, to go back to the question, it is an artistic statement. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned a game about drawing creatures, complementing the drawings and complementing the complements. And this, again, is something that I wouldn't be willing to make if I had to make 1,000 copies of it. I stand behind the game. I think it's a valuable game. I'm glad that it exists. But is there a big enough market for it? I don't know. But people have fallen in love with it. And I have sold, like, I sold out of the first print run, which is why there's a second edition.
Mm-hmm.
And
so how does this... So if you are... So there's a question that came in from Kat earlier before the stream. How does the process of small batch game creation and selling feel for you compared to Yogi? What is the... So you mentioned sort of doing 100 run, or a run of 100, and sort of stress testing the game, and then you feel confident that you can pitch it to a publisher. Do you think that process would be different if your goal was just to go straight to a processor? And what do you... publisher, and what would you be missing out on if you didn't do that 100 game run?
So I want to spend less than a minute explaining what I did for Yogi. So for Yogi, which I've got to... Oh, I don't know. I think this is Korean. It's been in about 20 language, more than 20 language. Yeah, this is actually Korean. It says Korea Board Games in the corner. I'm sorry, I'm not good at all the... One day my objective is to learn all the languages that it's available in, enough to be able to at least read out the cards, so that which, even in the Turkish, it's hard to know, even though anyway, back to the... I'm sorry, please keep me on track. Please tell me to stop talking.
It's all good.
Sometimes.
So what did you do how did you get Yogi published? How did that go for you? And was that your goal from the start?
I wanted to make it myself. I thought I was going to be the most amazing self-publisher ever. I thought I was going to do this game, and then people would be like, wow, that's amazing. And then I was expecting like thousands and thousands of people to just see this video of people being silly, and then I had higher expectations than the reality. Now, at the end of the Kickstarter, I think there were, I want to say, 143 backers for this. This was my first ever Kickstarter. Something like that, 140. And it was enough to go to the almost £3,000, which was my objective, which was enough to cover a print run of 1,000 copies. Now, right at the end, I said, oh, if we manage to make it, I'll give everyone like an expansion because I really want to make this happen. And it was a desperate move. I did end up a bit out of pocket. I didn't end up like financially crippling myself or anything, but I did end up with a lot of copies. And then I went to conventions. I was justified in my belief in the game because people at conventions did buy a lot of it. And my first time at Essen, I actually ended up making a tiny profit of 50 quid. But considering that obviously covers my space at Essen, the travel to Essen, my food at Essen, and frankly, I would pay to be at Essen. It's a great place. Like it, and I really enjoy being at conventions. And so it was because someone else pitched it to another company, Dave Cousins, shout out to Dave, who pitched it to Ravensburger and Gigamic, and I was in a fortunate position of being able to choose who I wanted to publish it, and Gigamic made me an offer I didn't want to refuse. and it's done well. And at this point, yes, I had the joy of seeing people play it. I had the joy of having my own artwork out there, and I had to, but now I basically don't do much. They take care of all the logistics, the distribution. That's what you're kind of letting them take the lion's share of the profits for. So, of course, it's much, much simpler. And because they sell more than 10 times as much as, well, they've sold more than 100 times as much as I ever did. And it's actually earning me income even through, I don't know if I would have been able to cope and upscale to the point where I was actually earning a decent income. That's what basically allowed me to pay my rent. And it had to be subsidized with other things. I did do development for Alley Cat and things like that, but that is the vast bulk of my income. And
Nice.
with these, I don't expect to earn so much, but if something goes really well, like a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify the monsters makes noises, I'm going to reinvest that money. The big difference is that it's less stress, because the thing about In a Bind, when I was selling it in a box, I was fearful. I was thinking every picture has to be blooming amazing. Now, anytime I'm like, oh, this isn't good, I kind of tell myself, you know what, it doesn't matter. And I know that sounds kind
Getting
of
it out there.
terrible to say, but yeah, people have consistently bought my stuff, even though I'm already aware of so many faults within it. But it's getting it out there, and I've set myself an objective to get a new game for every convention I go to this year, which means this time next year I'll have like at least another 10 games or so. And it's, even if I like, oh, that drawing, that could be better, oh, that color doesn't quite work, it's like, shut up, Bez. It's like a £5 game, and that's what kind of makes me like less anxious about it compared to when it was like in a box right out of the bat, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And
So
even now, like, there's the whole imposter syndrome of, are these really worth £9? Like, apparently they are, but yeah, I feel, do you know what I mean?
yeah. Ken asked before the live stream, what's the most important thing to focus on? It sounds like for you, one of the most important things is just getting it out there and getting it done.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
like, look, you can say, how do I prioritize these things? If you can put up the list again.
Yeah.
I'm going to say component quality is right at the bottom. I don't care about that for my games. I do not care. I make the cards as cheap as possible. I would like them in a box just so that people kind of like them in a shop. They might actually get them off the shelf. For me, self-satisfaction has to be the number one thing, because if I'm not happy, if I'm not enjoying myself, what am I doing this for? I make games because of my intellectual curiosity, because I want to see things happen, because I want to have the pride of saying, yeah, here's a whole bunch of creatures that I drew, and here's a whole bunch more. Here's the cute comical ones, if you like cute comical creatures. And hey, this is a game that I'm not entirely happy with all the colors of the cats, but hey, I made it, and it's good, and it's still a game that I'm relatively proud of. Like, I'm not ashamed of it. It's like, yeah, I feel like this is a good game, and I'm happy with it. And that self-satisfaction, that is the most important thing. Uniqueness, only insofar as it makes me happy. It has to be unique enough so that I can say, there's a reason for this game to exist. If I'm just making another matching game, I could probably do something with exactly the same mechanisms as a game that's already existed, and it would sell. But I get, even within like a game about cute comical creatures and trying to identify the monsters makes noises, a reskin of my previous one, I get less satisfaction. Do you know what I mean? But then it is the communication, seeing people at conventions, seeing people enjoy the games. Like, yeah, you talked about brand building, and if you share the screen briefly, I can show you some of the envelope parts that I've done. And so everyone who gets one of my games gets an illustration on one side of the envelope. On the other side, he gets a self-portrait, and it reminds them to enjoy themselves. And hopefully it's something that makes people sort of giggle or smile or whatever. And it, when I'm at a convention and people are happy to see me, people are excited, or people are like, oh, this is, and there's Chris who is helping me stuff a whole bunch of envelopes. And that's the end of that wee slideshow. But it's, yeah, Catherine says, if we had a universal basic income, I think we would have a lot more people like you, 100%, because that's essentially what Yogi has given me. Yogi doesn't quite pay what most people think the universal basic income should be, but it gets me close enough that I'm not constantly scared of, am I going to be able to survive? Do you know what I mean? I am confident that I'm going to be able to pay the rent for until probably the end of this year, and fingers crossed for the foreseeable future. And yeah, absolutely.
So Catherine says, I feel like I need to polish my games, which gets in the way of me ever finishing them. I'm in that club too. How do you personally just get your games out there? Is that 100 copy
cheap.
thing something that
no,
like
I think you're focusing too much on the 100 copies. 100 copies is just like make it 50, like make it whatever you feel like you can print. Like 100 is just based on the fact that I sold out of 50 within a day. I think that 100, because of the number that I'm doing, it might take me a few months. But look, if I say this is a game, it's £5. I mean, it's the lowest quality that I could do. It's the cheapest quality cards, and so this game, you don't expect much from it. It's literally a Bezzy bargain bag. That's how I've branded them all. I called them the Bezzy bargain bags. It's £5, and I think that is a bargain. Now, if you've got some issues with it, if there's something, let's look at actually this one. Again, about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. If we can find some of, here's a blue shape. This is meant to be blue. It was darkened up because we wanted it to be colorblind friendly. So yellow is the lightest, red is the mid-tone, blue is almost black, deliberately. But then I didn't expect so many people to say, wait, this is blue, and then be really confused by it, even after a game. And so what I'm thinking is, for the next edition, maybe have 2 different tones. So rather than just one color and then darken it up, make wee changes. Yes, absolutely, I'd make changes. And that's the whole point. That it is all about experimentation. Thank you for the question, Brian. It's all, if I don't have good ideas for changes, like, then they might be really small tweaks. Like a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after it makes noises. The only change between first and second edition were that I got everyone to vote on their favorite creatures. The 16 ones that didn't have any votes, I got rid of them. I drew some new creatures. So hopefully the average quality is slightly higher. Now,
so rather than having a lot of us, I think, when Catherine was talking about polishing and waiting till like releasing your game, to
make
a lot
it
of
so
us
that
like
it's something that you're not ashamed of. Make that, rather than make it something I'm really proud, this is my life's work, this is the way the game's going to be forever. Just make it, this is something that I'm not ashamed of, and like I can stand behind. What's the cheapest way you can get it out? What if you put it into bags? If
so
you
it's a process.
Make it,
getting it out is a process, not just a point in time.
Because look, in a bind to Yogi, like I sold, I won't say 3,000 copies of In a Bind, and then after like a year, I realized, hey, wait a minute, this one card is not as good as the other cards, and or Yogi, I got them to tweak that. And for the L deck, the games, they do change even after so many years. Might say, oh, actually, this could be better. And all of these games can be better. No game is ever finished. That's the thing. Like, you've always got a future edition that you can do. And yeah, Catherine Drew, playtester friends, or take it down to a local game store? Oh, sorry, that's someone talking to
in
Catherine.
the midst of processing, polishing it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think this is, look, you can playtest it, but once people are actually enjoying it, then if people are at a certain point, I do ask the question, how much would you pay for this game? Because that's the key thing. And if people say a number that's higher than the amount that you're able to sell it for, then it's ready to print, right? And sometimes you get people who say, oh, I would pay 20 quid for this game, but it's got like 300 cards. And so you know that you've got to change something. And sometimes someone
So it's
earlier,
like, how much is the experience worth, not just how much are the components worth? That's what you're gauging when you're playtesting and then asking that question, right?
Yes, exactly. It's how much would you pay for this game, not how much would you pay for this if you saw it in the shop, because I want to know, would people recommend it to other people? Would people, having watched a video, be likely to spend the money on it? Would people, having played it at a convention, then go away with it? And the truth is that almost everyone bought this after they playtested it, and not everyone bought this one because this one was just, again, a wee bit trickier than I realized it would be, because apparently I'm better at counting stuff than most people. I didn't realize this was a skill I had. But someone asked about component limitations.
Yeah, I think it was. Let me see if I can find that question. Is it this one?
Yes. So
Yes.
Stephen, what? Sorry, I'll let you read it. How I'm sorry, I'm taking over. I do apologize.
No, all good. So when working with small batch publishing, what are some of the most important criteria you have to consider? Do these limit the game that you want to make? So, you're talking about making a small quantity of something on the cheap. Obviously, you're not going to make something with hundreds and hundreds of components, and that seems to guide your designs, right?
Exactly. And it goes back to, frankly, Yogi. Back then, I was trying to think when I started that, it did start as something very different. I mentioned how it was a lot more Flux-like, which you can't at all see in the final game that it became. But back then I was thinking, I want to make a game that's about 50-something cards, because that's what fits on a print run. I know that much. I've learned about manufacturing. This is something that I can use Kickstarter, and it could become a big thing. And my objective is to sell tens of thousands of copies. And I want to make something that's really small and easy to print. Now, what's easy to print when it's tens of thousands of copies? Sure, you might be able to do more. The exact considerations might be slightly different, but still, my printer is any number that's a multiple of 18 cards. So for them, frankly, 32, 50, or 60. 62, it would all be quite similar in terms of price, because then also I paid them to put them into bags and assemble them, which is very useful to me, and I do not want to do all of that assemblage myself. And Rob does a fantastic job, and I know that this is something I can get done cheaply. I know that this is something I can sell cheaply. And so, yes, absolutely. I'm thinking, I want to make a Bezzy bargain bag. I've got lots of game ideas. I will pursue the ones that I can do cheaply.
And I think it's very smart. As I'm looking into manufacturing for Bah Humbug, the game collection I'm working on right now, I'm realizing, like, I have to find the right printer to do the cards. I have to prep the files. There are all these things that I'm having to learn. And if I keep telling myself the next game I do, I already know this, that, and the other thing, and I'm going to use this as a recipe as I go forward, because I won't have to think about all that stuff. So it sounds like, I assume, and somebody was just asking, is there one printer company that you use? It sounds like you have kind of like a template or a recipe. While the games are changing, you've got your format down. You've got bags. You
exactly.
can sell at conventions. So you're not having to make all those decisions every time.
And so, again, that is Rob Butler of Dice Sports. And yeah, I had a chat with them on one of my streams. I can, pardon me, find the link if you would like it.
Yeah, sure. We can pop that in the comments for sure. So we're coming up on an hour. I love talking to you, Bez, and you give me so
Oh,
many
thank you very
good
much.
nuggets to think about. I want to know from the people who are watching, what is a big takeaway that you're getting from this chat right now? What is something that maybe you've learned about Bez, or something that you like, something that she's done that you think you could incorporate into your own game design? What is something that works for you? Let's see. We've got a YouTube. So this is a link to. I just got a link from you, Bez. This is for
Yep, if you
Rob.
paste that into the comments.
Okay.
So this link is essentially to Rob Butler, and that is the only person that I consider at this point, just because their prices are better. And I mean, Cards on Monday have a thing going on, and there's other people that have things going on, but yeah, Make playing cards is just super expensive. Game Crafter, to get it shipped here, and
Mm-hmm.
frankly, even the raw price of getting Game Crafter stuff made and then shipped within the USA, it doesn't seem viable to me.
Yeah, you really do have to think about. And a lot of us, especially if you're an artistic person, you like games, you like collectible, good quality games. We get obsessed a little bit about the quality of components and things, but you really do have to think about costs if you're gonna take the approach like you're taking, where you put it out, you cover your costs, you kind of keep that rolling forward. Maybe that makes the game better eventually down the road. Maybe a publisher picks it up, but you have to think about those costs. It's not just something that you pour money into and hope that you get it back. You have a plan for how you're going to make that back, and I think that is great. Somebody says, Bez tells me to be happy about what you do. It's not all about the money. Oh, that's a good takeaway.
100%. Yeah, like there's a million reasons to make games.
And Catherine says, I always like seeing Bez finishing things. It's very inspirational, so I'm going to try and let things go a bit. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that I'm writing down little catchphrases from you, Bez, too. But I wrote just get it out, all caps. Good things to get things out. Make it unique, I think, is good advice, too. Because there are a lot of people who are making, I play test a lot of games. And it's like, this is somebody who really liked this game, and they've made a different version with a different theme and a slightly different mechanic. But I forgot how you put it, but it was like, does this game need to exist? Is it justified for existing? Does it bring something new to the market? I think that's a very, very good question to ask. I like how you talked about there are lots of matching games, but what would it look like if a game was about specifically not matching things? That's your hook. And if you're designing for something that, if you make it unique, you automatically have a hook. So that's kind of one of my takeaways, I think, for sure.
I mean, I rarely start with. I more often start with mechanisms than theme, but I think I start from like a moment or an experience or the hook first. Most I think that's the best place to start.
Yeah, and so many of us design games, and then we say, what is the hook of this game? But if you start with the hook, you know what it is the whole time. And you can probably make decisions about if something isn't working or supporting that hook, you have kind of a guiding light to know where to bring it.
Someone asked if I have tips for conventions. They said that's the one question I think we missed. Do you go to gaming conventions as a vendor to sell, promote your games? What are some of the lessons you have learned? And I think that could last like for sure another hour. But I would say that the one thing that I've learned, if you can share the screen again, is stickers and business cards. Don't just have a business card that is a business card. Have something that's actually fun. Like I printed 2,000 special promos for UK Games Expo. Not these, but so I've got special little promotional cards. So when I went to Aircon, here's a little promotional card with a whimsical creature that's Mark Cook on one side and Ben on the other. So you can sort of see who they are. And then there's a cosplay card, which is humans cosplaying as creatures, which I thought was quite fun. And you might recognize one of the creatures as one of the original whimsical creatures and one of them as one of the creatures. Anyway, the point is that the Aircon 2022 cards, I printed like a few hundred copies of them. I knew that that was an expense, but I don't see conventions as, again, I am privileged that I can afford to write off a little bit of expense. I can afford to say, you know what, I mean, people talk about, oh, I don't have any budget, and then they say, oh, I just sent some review copies. Frankly, with my first game, my budget was about 30 quid. And in that, I include all the cost of assembling the stuff and sending out one review copy. And that's like all the money I had for it, pretty much. Like, I didn't have the money to be sending out multiple review copies. That's more than I had. But like now, I can afford to go to a convention and say, I'm going to spend 30 quid on these promo cards. People will appreciate them. I spend a couple of hours drawing these creatures. People appreciate it. It is unique to that convention. Not just, hey, here's a promo card for my game, but here's a promo card that you can only get at this one place. It has the date. It has a memento of this convention. I do check in with the convention organizers ahead of time to make sure it's okay. And have something. Bring people to your stand. Don't just sit behind. And get in front. Hand some people. Say, would you like a game? Give them the 5-second pitch. If, like, the 5-second pitch might be like, do you like words games? That's a good, like, I say 5 seconds. I really mean like 2-second pitch. And that is itself like a quick pitch. Do you like words games? And if they say yes, then cool, show them one of the words games. If they say no, you say, well, how do you feel about quick party games? And then if they say yes, then cool, now you give them like the 10-second pitch, which might be the name of the game in the case of some of my more recent things.
Yeah,
and
I love that your titles are the pitch.
But like, that's the second level. That's the second level. Like, the first level is just interacting with them, smiling, saying hello, and asking if they like a particular kind of game. And that's the key thing.
Yeah, there's a couple questions coming in about basically production, right? Catherine is saying the game crafter isn't what she would consider a viable option for real publishing. The minimum order quantities at the printing companies are her barrier for bigger games. And somebody is asking about having the card shipped to yourself. So is it Rob, the printer you use? Rob isn't a games printer, right? Rob is a
they're a small scale thing. Like, they do bigger runs of like 1,000, but once you're like above 1,000, you're definitely probably better off using someone else, like looking at other options. But if you're consistently getting, you know, hundreds, then it's still worth using Rob for sure. And they do a great job. Like, it's not, they don't do linen finish cards. They don't do as nice boxes as I could get from another company that I would like to use. Obviously, the cost is going to be a wee bit higher for what you get. But yes, sorry, what was the question again?
So I guess what I'm looking at is production questions, right? Is you know, there are things like drive-through cards and print and play cards and the game crafter, and there are these game production companies. But if you're
most of them
working
are based
under
in
your
the USA, the ones that you've mentioned.
Yeah, but even I guess I'm thinking like maybe we need to also look outside of game manufacturing companies as well. I'm talking to a local printer about something for a different project right now, and I'm finding out prices are quite realistic for a lot of things.
100%.
If you go with a local printer, and I'm getting quicker responses from local printers than I am from the big ones where I have to fill out a quote request for. I just send an email to a real person, say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is this something you could do under this sort of budget? So I think also thinking about, you know, if you're not a big game publisher who's going to print 10,000 copies, do you really want and need to aspire to go to a big manufacturing place to get the quality and everything and the linen finish and the all these things that you need? Or can we just get it out there so that more people are playing it and loving it and enjoying it, and maybe down the road you upgrade the components, maybe down the road.
And that's the key thing about doing cards. Like, cards are such an easy thing to do. And so, you know, Ellie Dix, who's also based in the UK, also works with local manufacturers who don't do other games at all, but they know what cards are, I mean, that's a relatively easy thing. Do you know what
Yeah, and
boxes
people
are?
do rounded business cards. Every
Yeah.
printer, you know, will do rounded business cards today, which is essentially a game card. They can do different size cards and different things like that too. So that's a good takeaway too, I think, is that if you're aspiring to get a game out there, you know, to test it, to keep evolving it, and to get it out into the world, whether it's 100
I
copies or
mean, there
50
must
copies or
be
whatever.
someone local to you. I mean, look, I'm not going to say there must be, because, you know, like New Zealand's pretty desolate is the wrong word, sparsely populated. That's what I want
Well,
to
I will
say.
tell you. So I'm living on a boat in a place called Luperon in the Dominican Republic, and I have a printer here that I can email things to. I probably can't produce hundreds of copies, but if I needed something done, I have somebody I can go to. And
That's
also,
amazing.
so print and play is a good option too for people who maybe don't want to mess with the manufacturing, because there is, like, designing a game is a particular skill set and it takes a lot of time. Producing a physical game is another whole thing. There's, like, you know, there's all these different venues that you have to explore when you're producing a game. Making a print and play game, if you can lay out cards already, if you already have a little bit of graphic design knowledge, it's not super difficult. There are places like Martin's Print and Play Hideaway on Facebook. There are places where you can release your game or send it out to people, and get it out 50 copies into the world, and you will start getting feedback coming back to you. You'll start getting ratings on the Board Game Geek. You will get people that say, I really don't like the way this card is, I wish it was like this. And you say, great, I can make that for zero cost, that change, so that I'm ready to manufacture. So you could even have a step, if we think of making 100 copies or 50 copies or whatever as kind of a step toward making a better version, as a step toward maybe pitching to a publisher. Even before that, a print and play copy might be a precursor to a small batch too. So this is kind of like,
And look,
there's lots of baby steps.
Like Catherine says, in New Zealand, getting local printing done is exorbitantly expensive. And again, I am blessed that I live essentially on a tiny island with millions of people. Like, I live in the capital, where I think there's like 20 million people in like a relatively small place. I can go from like one corner to the other corner in a couple of hours. And you know, that seems like a long trip. That's not a trip that I'm willing to make every day. And people are in the USA are like, oh, that's nothing. And I am blessed that we've got access to so many people within such a small island, and that there are printers within such a tiny island, and I am able to get it done. And so I don't want to say this is something available to everyone, but the way I see it, the way I see it is, if I get a game good enough to pitch to a publisher and it's a card game, at a point where I'm ready to pitch it, I might as well actually print a whole bunch of copies. Yeah. It's like, at that point, why not? And at least that way, yes, again, it does go back to the ego thing, that there's the self-satisfaction, that there's a version out there with my artwork and my stamp on it exactly the way I want it to be. But also, it means that when it comes to giving them the copies, then, okay, let's say I print 100, then maybe I keep back a few of them. And, okay, hey, you're interested in this? Here, you just have one. I don't need to worry about how many to print. I just print 100, and then, you know, I've got extra, and then if that sells out, well, I'll print another 100 and do a second edition. And so, yeah.
Sounds manageable. Yeah, Brian says, besides small local printers, there are smaller online printers too. For example, moo.com, a little bit pricey, but we'll print business cards. So I think the moral here is, get something out that's unique, and use what you have that's available to you. If you don't live in London, you live somewhere, and there will be some way for you to get your game out in the world, whether it's making your own copies, whether it's making a print and play available, whether it's, you know, sending it to somebody else so that they can produce it maybe locally, you know, thinking outside the box, and using what you have. You know, I think we get caught up a lot in game design, looking at how bigger companies do it and the way you're supposed to do it. And this is how you're supposed to run a Kickstarter campaign. This is how many copies that you need. And, you know, we don't have to do it that way. I think I know that you have, with Yogi, like you said, you've got an income coming in, which allows you a little more flexibility in making just But you can make a card game and get it out into the world for less than $100, for a small budget.
I think that because it's gone on quite a bit, like if we can maybe close it off to questions, but like maybe we can address the 2 outstanding questions that we've not gotten to yet.
Yeah, so
the one from the Facebook user that says, yep, exactly. So I'm just going to say Big Cartel. I shared my website earlier, stuffbybez.com. I mean, stuffbybez.bigcartel.com. The reason I chose Big Cartel back in the day is because they don't charge a monthly fee. You get to put your stuff in there, and then as long as you've put your account information correctly, they handle the credit card processing, and then it comes over to me, and I ship it out to them. So if you want a good website, that's what I use. And I am going to be completely overhauling my web shop at the end of this month. Just for the record, it only allows you to sell 5 things, but with those 5 things, you are allowed to have different options. So I could say, hey, this is Yogi Guru or Yogi the Original. And if you click on that, then you get to choose like multiple things. And hey, this is all my print and play files. And then you go into that option and you get different options.
Okay, yeah, so creatively working around.
It doesn't look good. So I am going to actually, end of this month, start paying the $10 a month. I think it's $10 rather than 10 quid. I can't remember which it is. But either way, it feels like a reasonable amount. And then you get to have like 50 items. And you can have like 5 images for each. And I could still have variations of each item if I wanted. But then that's just a lot nicer. And then I can, with that many things, I might even start putting original art and unique stuff on the shop. So because it also then allows me to manage stock levels.
Okay, so Big Cartel is like a payment processor storefront. They collect money, manage inventory, and then but then you ship out the games yourself from your own inventory.
Like I'm just recommending them because they've worked really well for me. And to manage international shipping, look, I am lucky in that, let me just say, this is a large envelope. This is a small parcel. If you can tell the difference in width.
Wow, the difference.
Yeah, so like, unfortunately, this is right on the margin. So actually, this tuck box turns it into a small parcel, which means that this would cost about 4 times as much to ship as this. And you've got to be mindful of that, obviously. When I did a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises, again, I am privileged, and someone that I already knew, that had met a couple of times at Essen, got in touch, said, hey, would you like me to help you with this? Maybe I print some here and then we send over there. And I've done that. So this is someone who's essentially partnering with me to print some copies, and they keep them in Poland because Poland, it's much cheaper to send out stuff. It's literally cheaper for me to send something from UK to Poland than Poland to USA than to send it directly. Obviously, it doesn't quite work out like that because if I did send it to Poland, then I'd have to pay for the labor to repost it on. But it still makes the point that shipping prices are kind of weird. Now, I have realized that people are willing to pay, like, sometimes for shipping, and it is problematic because prices keep fluctuating, and that is why, honestly, unless I'm totally certain, unless I'm like sending something out every single week, I charge, if it's like something that I've not sent out, that's like, oh, I've never sent this out before, how much do I charge for it? I might put it there and make the US shipping a bit too much, and then be like, I want to make sure that I don't end up posting something and being charged 20 quid for it. Because that's happened in the past when I ended up being 15 quid out of pocket. after a sale, and that's not a good position to be in, where I'm almost like, well, I wish I'd rather just refund this person, and that's not great. And so, but yes, it again, I am working with Chris to helps me again, privilege 2 days a week. We are going to be checking very systematically what weight is everything, what size is everything, how much will it cost, and we will probably be rechecking everything once a month. So from July, things will hopefully be like a bit better managed, and it'll be nicer. But yeah, it's a pain in the arse, but that's kind of the boring things that you've got to do.
Yeah, well, all things to think about. All things to think about. But imagine it's easier when you're doing these small quantities. If you had to pay $15 out of pocket for 2,000 backers in a campaign, that would be
Yeah,
a pretty big blow to do that.
I mean
So,
that would be financially crippling for sure.
yeah, yeah. So small batches means a little smaller risk and more opportunities to learn along the way.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Bez, for taking your time. I know it's getting late there. I so appreciate everybody for watching. Thank you, Bez, for being here and for answering questions. We keep the conversation going. This will be posted on YouTube afterwards. It'll, of course, be posted in the Small Batch Game Publishers group and on the Small Furry Games page, so we can interact and keep that conversation going. Brian says thank you. I say thank you so much, and everybody have a great rest of your week, and let's keep talking about this stuff. This is valuable stuff.
Yeah, and if anyone does want to ask any questions directly of me in the YouTube video, then I'll maybe make a wee comment, and so then I'll get pinged if anyone replies to it. So, and also if people do want to ask questions that have not had the space to reply to this, I can frankly make an entire video about it, and yeah, hopefully explain more that way. But lots of love.
All right. Thanks, Bez, and thank you, everybody. I will give you our little Small Furry Games video, and hope you all have an excellent night. Bye, Bez.
Bye-bye.